Attorney General Gloria Akufo is urging Parliament to pass the Conduct of Public Officers Bill 2018 to boost efforts in the fight against corruption. The bill was laid in the House in 2018 and is going through second reading today. On the House debates the principles of the bill. Madam Akufo told MPs the bill will help regulate how public officers conduct themselves so their activities are in the interest of the country.
The purpose of the Conduct of Public Officers Bill is to give effect to Chapter 24 of the 1992 Constitution, domesticate the United Nations Convention Against Corruption and the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption, and to provide for other purposes. The two anti-corruption conventions were ratified by Parliament on 14th December 2005. The provisions of these conventions provide the international template for anti-corruption. Mr. Speaker, a public officer occupies a position of trust to serve the best interests of the general public. Public office is defined in Article 295 of the Constitution to include an office, the emoluments of which are paid directly from the consolidated fund or directly out of monies provided by Parliament. It also includes an office in a public corporation established entirely out of public funds or monies provided by Parliament. Increasingly, the public expects and demands that public officials perform their functions with integrity and in a fair and unbiased manner. Public officers are therefore expected not to allow their private interests and affiliations to compromise official decision-making and public management. When public officials breach the duty of trust, a conflict of interest situation arises. Articles 284 to 288 under Chapter 24 of the 1992 Constitution provide a code of conduct for public officials. Article 287 of the Constitution mandates the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice to investigate allegations of contraventions of or non-compliance with the Code of Conduct of Public Officers, including conflict of interest, non-declaration of assets, and illegal acquisition of wealth. The Constitution does not, however, define in detail situations that constitute conflict of interest. Neither is there a legal framework which the Commission can rely on to determine complaints made against public officers. The absence of a clear definition of conflict of interest and a unified code of conduct for public officers make the determination of the misconduct by the public officer difficult and for the Commission to investigate. Mr. Speaker, legislation on corruption in this country is scattered in a number of laws. The Criminal Offences Act 1960 Act 29 contains provisions.
Joseph Opoku Gakpo is on the ground for us. He's joining me live. Hi, Joseph. I'm hoping that I do hear you. I do hear you. Tell us, Joseph, what else is contained in this bill?
A number of things. It gives a breakdown of what exactly would constitute a situation of conflict of interest when a public officer is undertaking his or her activities in that regard. It makes room for how public officers can accept gifts in a way that the acceptance of those gifts will not influence how they go about their duties as public officers. It makes provisions for how public officers should not engage in any acts of sexual harassment, more like cautioning against that. It makes room for how public officers should not use their offices when it comes to personal gain and all, and a number of other related clauses. It also makes room for clarification on what exactly would constitute acts that are in contravention of the requirements of the offices of the various public officers. And then it also talks about issues having to do with the declaration of assets which the bill is actually very much heavy on, and the Attorney General has also been speaking broadly about, even as the conversation on the bill was done on the floor of Parliament today.
I do know, Joseph, by the way, that there is supposed to be a gift tax. Does that find itself anywhere in this bill?
So this is actually something, a document, a document that lays out what acceptable gifts are in terms of those who hold public office. So when you read the portion having to do with gifts and all, it says that there should be an established program for the recognition of various gifts that actually come in on the part of a public officer on any occasion. And then it also talks about how public officers should not engage in soliciting souvenirs that exceed a certain amount. So this is actually laying out specifics on what gifts public officers can accept and what gifts public officers not accept. But let me quickly move into the bit having to do with the declaration of assets, because what this bill seeks to do is repeal the earlier law that guided the declaration of assets. That's the Public Officers Act 1962, that's Act 114, and also the Public Office Holders, that's the Declaration of Assets and Disqualification Act 1998, that's Act 550. So you recall that usually when public officers are taking office at the beginning of the tenure of any government, we see situations where they submit a list of their assets. The Auditor General puts that in an envelope. It's under lock and key. No one can verify what's in that document. There is the possibility of it being an empty document, but the law doesn't allow the Auditor General to actually open it under any circumstance unless a court of competent jurisdiction has given the green light, or a commission of inquiry has actually made that recommendation. So whoever the public officer is can falsify whatever details are in terms of what assets he or she has, and no one has any means of verifying, unless probably it becomes an issue. Now, when this Conduct of Public Officers Bill 2018 becomes law, that particular legislation will be repealed, and the new legislation, which will actually be taken care of in this Conduct of Public Officers Bill, will make the point that public officers who fail to submit a declaration or clarification as required under this act, or submits a declaration that contains information which the public officer knows or ought to have known to be false or misleading, commits an offense which is punishable. And it goes on to say that that public officer who either doesn't declare his or her assets or goes ahead to give false information is liable to a conviction of a fine of not less than 100 penalty units and not more than 250 penalty units, or a term of imprisonment of not less than 6 months and not more than 2 years, or to both. In addition, the appointment of that officer may be terminated. So you recall that recently ASEPA was in a tango with some of the commissioners at SHAD,
right?
And the commissioners at the EC, the issue went to SHAD. They were found not to have declared their assets. Same happened with some judges and all. But eventually, SHAD ended up ruling that although that hadn't been done, they did that subsequently. But when this actually becomes law, anyone who fails to declare their asset before taking over office, there are the chances of your appointment being terminated or you going to prison for a period of 2 years. So all of that is contained in this latest bill that has been laid in Parliament for approval.
Everybody has said that we have very nice laws on paper, but it's only the implementation we seem to have challenges with. Joseph, what else has the House been discussing as we wrap up?
So the Deputy Minister for Finance joined in the debate on the 2020 media budget review statement in Parliament earlier today. He, for example, disclosed a number of things, including disclosures that government is doing the payment of those who've lost monies in the financial institutions collapse recently. You recall the former president, John Mahama, made reference to that and said that the payment of those monies will be done when the NDC comes back to power. Or the Deputy Minister has been disclosing that the processes to get all of those monies paid have actually gone on in a very advanced manner and the monies are being disbursed. Beyond the debate, the Minister for Aviation was in Parliament to respond to questions on the WA airport, and he indicated that the operationalization of that airport is being hampered by a number of masts that have been erected by GBC, Vodafone, and other institutions in that particular enclave. And additionally, the Deputy Minister for Land and Natural Resources has been disclosing that government has actually planted trees to the tune of more than 11,000 acres over the last 2 years or so since the MPP has actually been in power. So those conversations have been happening. Tomorrow we're expecting that Parliament to conclude the debate on the mid-year budget review statement, and then the House will deal with other matters, including some loans and all.
Joseph, thank you very much. We'll be also looking at that story about former President John Mahama saying they'll be paying DKM, because the DKM customers have also been speaking in the Bono East region. Joseph, thank you. Joseph Opoku Gakpo is our parliamentary affairs correspondent there. Always good to have him here on the show with his comprehensive, details from the stories there. Away from Parliament.